When I was 20, which is a bloody long time ago, I was struck down by a florid version of what I later discovered was OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Anxiety is rampant in our society today, and I got hit with the full whammy. I remember exactly what had happened. I was driving to a friend's 21st. When you're 20, that's basically all you do. And now it's funerals. And I was just looking at the lighted windows. My boyfriend was driving, and I suddenly started to have these intrusive, violent thoughts. Horrifying, intrusive, violent thoughts. I fought really hard to try and push them out of my brain. I still feel the shame of it as I talk about it now. But the more I tried to push those thoughts away, the more they pushed their way in. And that's when my decades-long battle with anxiety began. I went through my life looking like a perfectly functioning young woman. I got jobs. I got good jobs. I got promoted. I got married. And I decided with my husband, who's here in the audience now, that we would have a baby. But the whole time that I was making those decisions and living life the way that, people and society thought I should, inside my head, I had the feeling that any minute now, I was going to ruin it all by doing something outrageously dangerous, violent, absurd, rude, angry, that would appall everyone around me. It was like having a sword of Damocles over my head. I actually went around for all those years with constant pins and needles in my wrists and hands because I was holding myself back from whatever it is that I was about to do. I hated knives. They made me afraid. I hated train station platforms. Driving was an exercise in terror for me. I did all those things. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I never did anything. And in fact, at the time, I was, as you can see, about 5 foot tall and weighed about 45 kilos. So if I had gone for you, it probably would have been like being attacked by a kitten. But none of that made any difference. I was horrified by myself. I felt like inside my head was a coiled monster. And yet, I went on. I lived. I performed. I functioned. Even I had fun. But I was always on edge. Always terrified. I sought help. I went to psychiatrists. I went to psychologists. I went to, sort of ooga booga weekends where I was supposed to, commune with God knows what. Sorry. I'm far too earthed for that shit. None of that was any help at all. The best person I saw was actually a relationships counsellor who taught me strategies and helped me understand a whole lot of things, simple things like whose problem was it and where I started and the rest of the world began. And she really helped me enormously. She was a wonderful person as well. But I learnt lots of skills, I learnt a lot of strategies. Did any of it make any difference at all to the anxiety that I carried around with me more or less permanently? No, not a dint, not a dint. I got wiser, but I was still terrified all the time of nameless nothing. And I knew rationally that this was bullshit, that I was making this up. But none of that made any difference. And I think that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is when you know you are being a dickhead and you can't help it. And you're being a dickhead to yourself. Not to anybody else, to yourself. Which makes it worse. I just felt like maybe I got to the point where I thought to myself that I was just a dud. I was a kind of Friday human being, poorly wired. They'd gone to lunch before they made me. So I didn't work very well. And then I'd have to live with this level of constant preparedness, alertness, on alert for the rest of my life. That was how I felt that my life was going to unfold. It wasn't a great prospect, but what choice did I have? I can actually remember thinking sometimes, well, if I ever do any of those terrible things, I can just kill myself. It seemed like a better proposition. That is not a good place for a young woman to be in. So you might ask yourself, why would a woman who is thinking these kinds of thoughts, who's, has these intrusive thoughts going round and round and round in her head the whole time, decide to have a baby? I mean, how dare she? But it was like there was two people inside me. There was the coiled up monster, the crazy me, the any minute now about to be out of control me, and then there was the one that was carrying on with life, getting on with things, learning things, wanting to move forward. Two different people inside the same person. So my husband and I went ahead and had a baby. Now the weird thing is, I'm pregnant. Was I anxious about being pregnant? No. No, I spent my time anxiously worrying about something that was never going to happen might happen. I never thought about all the things that might happen when you get pregnant. Even though I'd had a miscarriage sometime before, there was nothing rational about what was going on in my head. And of course, as I've discovered since, it's never the things that you worry about that actually blindside you on the back of the head. It's the stuff you've never thought of. So at 34 weeks pregnant, I'm sitting in a Thai restaurant and my waters broke. Whoosh. It wasn't embarrassing because it turned out it was only my hindwaters. For the women in the audience who've had babies, they'll know what I'm talking about. When you're pregnant, you have two sets of waters, fore and hind, and my hindwaters went. So it wasn't the full gaboosh, which would have been embarrassing. Oddly enough, I suppose if you think about it now, and I hadn't thought about it till I'm speaking to you this minute, that was the sort of thing that I had feared, the losing of control. Well, that was the loss of control. I couldn't have controlled it anyway. So I had to go straight to hospital. I had to complete bed rest, lie in hospital, and constant heartbeat baby monitoring and checking to see that my liquors, which is the fancy word they have for waters, hadn't grown an infection. And of course, after about a week of just lying in bed, they did. So I was to be induced because you can't have an infection in your womb and have a baby or survive. Lots of women in America may now be facing the fact that they may be asked to risk death in that situation. So I'm incandescent about what's happening there. So there I was, induced. And you know what? The labour was awesome. I had an epidural. Please don't go for the drug-free labour, for fuck's sake. It's painful. Really painful, and there is nothing awesome about physical pain. If you can avoid it, my advice is do. There's plenty of pain in life you can't avoid, so avoid the shit you can. The epidural was just awesome, absolutely wonderful. I'm so grateful I had it. Oh, 3 minutes to go. I haven't even got to my point yet. I'll get there quickly. It all went well, but she was so healthy. She was not put into a humidity crib even though she was premature. She went into a special care nursery and I saw a kid with a snotty nose running around that nursery. 2 days home, I got her home. I saw thick white snot come out of her nose. She was only 2.5 kilos. We took her back to hospital. We were admitted. She had a thing called RSV positive bronchiolitis. It's the biggest killer of babies under 1. Still, there's no vaccination for it. Any anti-vaxxers in the crowd, you're idiots. Anyway, there's no vaccination for it. I've spent days in intensive care, babies' intensive care. Makes me really like vaccinations. Anyway, she She was getting sicker and sicker, but no one could tell because she was jaundiced, so she looked nice and rosy. And then in my arms trying to breastfeed her because they kept saying to me, how much milk is she getting? I was a brand new mother. I didn't know how much milk she was getting. They don't put a gauge on your fucking breast. I didn't know. I was trying to be optimistic. I'd feel something and say a little bit, a minute. She was getting nothing. She stopped breathing in my arms. They rushed in. I knew she'd stopped breathing because there was a phalanx of white. They grabbed her out of my arms. There was a phalanx of white coats in front of me and they said, come on, come on, come on. And I knew she'd stopped breathing. I was sitting on a chair. They came out and said, she's breathing again. Then somebody went, come back. She'd stopped breathing for the second time. It was too unsafe to sit on the chair, so I sat on the ground. Then they pressed buttons and people came from everywhere and she'd stopped breathing for a third time. And suddenly I felt like I had to have something behind my back. And I went and shuffled back to the corner and I had the pot plan in front of me and it felt safer there. It was sort of animalistic, like I had to be guarded. And my husband arrived and he came and stood in front and he said, come out. And I said, no. And he said, come out for me. So I came out. She went into intensive care, officially the sickest baby in New South Wales that night. She got the last bed in Camperdown Children's Hospital. The next morning, all the therapy I'd done taught me to reach out for help. So I was through doing that, put on to a neonatologist who was a grief counsellor. He came to meet me in the cafe. And at that moment he walked up to me and he said these 3 sentences which began to change my life. He said, safety... No, he didn't say that. He said, terrible things can happen and they can happen to anyone. There's nothing special about you and there's nothing special about Polly, my daughter. Safety is an illusion. Danger is reality. Now maybe that sounds brutal to a new mother, a baby who's on death's door, literally intubated in intensive care. But it was like bricks fell off my shoulders. I realised that there was nothing I had done that had caused this, and there was nothing I could do that could make this better. And from that moment on, it didn't disappear straight away. The anxiety came in a big rush, sort of instantaneously. It didn't disappear straight away, but it began to dwindle because I started to realise that I could not do my baby's breathing for her. She had to do her breathing. I started to realise where I stopped and my child began and other people began. I started to realise that I can't control how other people react to me. I can control the content of this speech. I can't control whether you like it or not. So forgive me, I spend no time anymore worrying about whether you will. It is of no interest to me when I'm preparing. I'm just doing the best I know how to do. You react the way you want to, I'll say what I want to say, and hopefully we'll go on our way still friends. But there is no point in me worrying about it. Slowly I stopped trying to control the uncontrollable. I learnt where I stopped and the rest of the world starts. I learnt that if there was a 95% chance that something would be fun and 5% that it would go horribly wrong, go with the 95%. I realised my thoughts, and this was the most important thing, I realised my thoughts were just thoughts. I'd been doing this ridiculous thing where when I was having these intrusive thoughts, I would have a double response to them. So half of me would be thinking, by thinking these thoughts, I'm preventing it happening because I'm on alert and I'm holding my arms back and I'm, making sure that terrible things don't happen. But the other half of me is thinking, but by thinking these thoughts, I could be bringing them to life. I could be conjuring them up. As if I had any power over that kind of shit. I didn't. My thoughts were just thoughts. I could have any thought I wanted. Then I decide whether I act on it or not and let the thought go. The anxiety went as I started to realise that mostly it was ego and me seeing myself as way more powerful and important than I actually am. I'm just me. I'm just going to be me. I'm not even frightened of flying anymore The pilot's job is to fly the plane. Mine is to be a passenger. So give me the champagne and boot up the in-flight entertainment. I'm fucking good at that job. And there is absolutely no use in me worrying about whether the pilot is good at his. Why make any difference? Getting to that bedrock reality of what I had power over, what I could control, and what I couldn't was the most important thing. In fact, I am so now not anxious that some people have been rude enough to say I may have overcorrected.